Ka te kia ora koutou, kua hui mai nei tēnei rā nui, mō tātou mo Aotearoa whānui tonu. Gentlemen, I think the task ahead of us is to just sort of lower the tone a little bit. We've got a group of New Zealanders here, and of course New Zealanders are all obsessive about sport, so it's about time that we had a break from heady things such as changing the world and talk a little bit about sport. It was a great pleasure to play a small part in the pōhiri this morning, and I'm going to let you into the scary part of my thought process. I was looking at Deng, our keynote speaker, standing and talking to you all at the marae, and part of me was thinking about my job to represent us to Te Papa and Ngāti Toa, and there's a little part of me that's looking at Deng and thinking, I come from a family of hookers. For those of you that are not rugby people, it's a position in a rugby team that involves throwing the ball into a line out. So when you come from a family of hookers, you're always thinking about what kind of ideal person is going to receive the ball. So I'm looking at Deng and I'm thinking, yeah, he's light, he's tall, he looks like if I throw the ball to him, he's going to fight for the jolly thing, you know? So, and I know that some of you would have been looking at him and thinking he's a fast wing three-quarter, sprinting down the sideline and scoring tries, but coming from a family of hookers, he looks to me like a lock or a number 7. And why I've brought you into that complex part of my thought process is that I think the case for diversity in sport is pretty simple, really. The business case for diversity is crystal clear. New Zealand is a very small country. Actually, we'll start with the first assumption. I'm assuming you're all sports people because you're here for the sports panel discussion. And you're New Zealanders, so you must be sports people. Secondly, there's an arts person in here. How did we let that person in? Security, can you do something about the arts people? The thing about sports people, of course, is that we like a result. You know, sport's about competition. And the thing about New Zealand is we are a very, very small country at the bottom of the world with a very, very small population. So as sports people, if we have any hope of being successful, competing against the world in whatever code it is, then we can ill afford to have any part of the whānau left out of playing sport. You know, it's that simple. If we want to be successful, everybody needs to be part of the game. I'm a high priest in the Church of Rugby. Ian, to my left, is a cardinal in the Church of Rugby. He's actually based in the Vatican in Wellington. I'm a high priest in a very small parish called Wairarapa Bush. And I know for Ian and I were just talking about this. We know that for New Zealand rugby to continue to be successful, all the New Zealanders need to feel ownership of it. All the New Zealand children need to want to play our game and all those sorts of things. So, and I guess, as is so often the case, sport, particularly in this country, is a metaphor for a whole lot of other things. The same logic applies to the arts. The same logic applies to public service. The same logic applies to the economy. So anyway, I've probably taken up too much time. Ian's going to go last. Tayo, did they tell you you're going to go first? Lizzie's already introduced Tayo, so Tayo's going to come and talk to us now about what he is doing with the multi-ethnic football tournaments. Ladies and gentlemen, Tayo Agunlejika.
I didn't know I was going to go first. In a manner, in a real, in a waka, tinakoto, kinakoto katoa. A very good evening to you all. May I acknowledge Dame Suzanne Devoy and our team for making sport one of the topics for today. Not often sport is taken seriously, and or do we recognize the key role of sport as a tool to engage and support young people, in particular those who are hard to reach, and like just what my sister just presented, especially the refugee communities, the economically marginalized or people in geographically remote area. Sport is the only way that they can get out and be connected. May I also acknowledge New Zealand football. That's my church. And I've worked with them in the past 2 years, and I've seen the progress they're trying to achieve regarding diversity, engaging with the community. And may I also acknowledge your church, New Zealand Rugby. For the Sport for Everyone strategy. I so much looking forward to your consultation process with the other national sport organization to develop and implement those policies. And once it's launched December 31st, a New Year present. I'm here to talk about New Zealand Community Football Cup, which was established by New Zealand Police in 2008. Before I talk about that, I would like to go back to the basics. And the basics is the regional ethnic football tournament. Presently, we've got about 16 regions that organized through the city council, through the regional multicultural council. They organize their regional football tournament. That's how I joined the church. I joined the church in 2005. And then I didn't know Phil Young and Rakesh Naidu. Rakesh Naidu and Phil Young established the Hamilton and Christchurch regional football tournament, respectively. I think till today they're still debating who started it first. I'm not debating that because I know I joined them. But what we cannot debate is the reason for this initiative. We started the regional tournament because of our strong belief that sport transcends all kinds of barriers, whether cultural, political, racial, religion, or ethnic. If you take a good analysis of the ethnic, migrant, and refugee communities, you will see most of them came from a football-mad countries. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm not shy away to say I'm passionate about football. And so if you look at Somalia, Sudan, Assyria, most of the Cambodia, Colombia, they are all football mad. And that's why we see the strength of football to engage with this community. And I think they totally identify with football. So while the benefit of the tournament is we want to use it to promote ethnic diversity, improve networking, collaboration, engagement, familiarity, and interaction within ethnic, migrant, and refugee communities, as well as with the government agencies, as well as mainstream community. And I think when I started Upper Heart, the trophy was donated by the then Lower Heart Commissioner, Michael Hill, from the police. And I think, when Peter was talking about public service, I think I need to acknowledge New Zealand Police. New Zealand Police is one of the public service agencies that are proactively engaging and finding ways to engage with ethnic communities, and they've been doing that successfully for the past 5 years. And I think I've acknowledged Superintendent Wallace Omar is not here, but we have to give it to him. So for us, for football, we see it as an opportunity to change the status quo. Football, rugby, is the world's most popular entertainment and biggest mobilizer and unifier. And we can convince that we can use sport to mobilize for social change. We want to promote active health living and well-being as well. It worked. Personally, I've experienced it. From Upper Heart, we started from 8 communities. Till today, we've got 32 communities participating. We started with only 8 ethnic community, exclusive mainstream. But today we've got mainstream, Upper Heart Soccer Club, New Zealand Police, everyone together with one goal, to integrate, to get to know each other, to have fun. It worked. I've seen it. We need to look at sport with a different view. So I'm now go to New Zealand Police, the national tournament. As I said, it started in 2008. What it does is it's going to provide a national platform for players to aspire to. From the region, we wanted to create something at the national level so that they can aspire to add value to the region, and then to give people opportunity to actually integrate and have that conversation at the national level. With that tournament, we also have a youth program. So it's a kind of community engagement. We're hosting, the one we're doing this year is in Auckland, and we've picked Mangere. We picked Mangere East Primary School because they've got diverse young people there. We're planning to bring Sonny B. William to be an inspirational speaker there. So that's another way of engaging even at the younger level. The tournament is cumulative of more than 1,200 games of local level football with over 250 teams, over 250 ethnic groups. The local are organized by the City Council, by Regional Multicultural Council, and we use that to give them the opportunity to participate and engage in the region, but at the same time looking forward to participate at the national level. It's a kind of prestigious opportunity to them, understanding where they're coming from. It's an opportunity to learn new skills, to address issues that are important to them. Last year, I had the opportunity of, I think, a team from Montreal School. And I hope the person won't mind me saying this. One of the team is one of the boys that is being on the police watch list because of the ISO thing. And I kept my eye on the boy. And after the tournament, we brought them. We pay for their for 3 days accommodation, for their feeding for the 3 days. We put them in the hotel. After the tournament, the boy came to me and said, "I've never left Auckland before. I've never been on the plane before. I've never stayed in an hotel before. I've never been catered for like this before." You cannot measure the outcome. How can you measure that? Those are intangible things that statistics cannot measure. But how can I report that? How can I make impact? How can I report that this is the impact? But this is a story that somehow I believe has changed the boy's attitude. It's never been catered for. So I've got to round up. But what I'll say is it is very important, and I'll just have a snap at New Zealand football and New Zealand rugby, just to bring them back that they need to invest in the community. They need to invest and think strategically how they need to engage with the ethnic communities, with the marginalized society. New Zealand All Blacks, looking at their 2016 All Blacks team, 37 players team, 33 are from Pacific Island lineage, specifically Samoan, Tonga, Fiji, and American Samoan. Over the years of All Black, 1,133 have been through the All Black system, and 33% of them are Pacific, and also to some South African, Australian, Scottish. And I think that explains the success of All Black. Compared to All White, look at the photos. Sorry, Jamie. But what I'm trying to prove is, New Zealand rugby, although they've been able to do that inclusion at the national team, but can that be said of your governance? Can that be said of your coaching team at the national level? Can that be said of the referees and the administrators? I helped Rufa to set up Rongotai Football Academy. And there, Rongo-type rugby is very strong, but it's being coached by Pacific people. Can we replicate that at the national level? That's the question. For New Zealand football, I raised the question about New Zealand football with this picture. And what I got 2 years ago was, futsal white, they've got a lot of ethnic people there. And I think that's why futsal white is very successful and all white is not successful. So ending this, I'll just jump. Sorry, oh gosh, I'll just jump. What I'm going to bring up is, I think we're on a good path with New Zealand football and New Zealand rugby and other sports code working with the diversity goal. I think it's a good process, and I think the challenge is to put all the code, and I want to ask, how do you plan to engage more with ethnic communities? What are the investments planned to build ethnic communities' capacity to better contribute and participate in sport? New Zealand community football is not a separative thing, but it's a tool to engage. And we've used that, we've seen that success, we've been able to use that platform to engage with the mainstream. Sorry, Chris. I think I'll just round up that we need to seriously look at how we can facilitate more sector collaborative action to maximize and contribute for the contribution of sport, as well as enabler of social, cultural, and economic inclusiveness and development. Sorry for taking your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Tayo. Hello. Thank you, Tayo. Mark, straight to you.
Tēnā koutou, ni hao, hello fellow New Zealanders. And that last one's really important because what I've heard today is all about we being Kiwis, regardless of what our ethnicity is. Thank you, Paora, for the opportunity to tell our story, and this is a story about the New Zealand Chinese Association and what we're doing, or part of what we're doing to actually promote sports in the New Zealand environment. As you can see there, we've been here around 80 years. In fact, a lot longer than that, but 80 years in terms of the association. Basically, there's a lot to say there in terms of where we've been, but way back in 1909, everything was based on clan structures. There was no national body. By the time we got to 1935, we decided, hey, we need a national body to represent everybody, and hence the New Zealand Chinese Association was born. We're sort of the historic heirs of those that arrived in the gold rush. We're the older Chinese. So myself, I'm actually the second generation Chinese. You can tell Kiwi. So you can tell by my accent. But really, we are Kiwis. All the original members paid the poll tax, which is a £200, I suppose, penalty, you might say, for actually entering New Zealand, which equates to hundreds of thousands in today's money. We've got 14 branches throughout New Zealand, and the membership currently stands at about 6,000. Our objectives. Basically, be the leading Chinese organisation in New Zealand. Now, that doesn't mean taking over everybody, it's really being an umbrella organisation. And we have an issue whereby we have the older Chinese who effectively understand how we've developed through with Kiwis to where we are now, and the newer immigrants who have the their best will at heart, but because they act the way they do from overseas, we need to say to them, hey, actually, you're a Kiwi, you're in New Zealand, you've got to adapt. Basically, I'll let you read the rest of those in terms of the normal type of objectives and organisation we have. We are a charity, we're run by volunteers, and it's really about promoting culture, making sure the morals are right, and also looking after the welfare of new immigrants and the older people in New Zealand. So that's really us. Okay, we have lots of programs, and And really, I just want you to focus on these programs in terms of, I mean, we've got the winter camp, which is going back to Guangdong, which is where the original Chinese came, the original old Chinese came from, which is the southern China. Chinese language, there's the Mandarin versus Cantonese argument. Really, we want to teach both and maintain that Cantonese language. Youth development camps, this is where I want to focus on, is basically we have youth development camps that cover ages 12 to 18, leadership development camps, that's 18 to 30, and we've also got what we call Future Dragons, which are young professionals, and what we're trying to do is get the youth to actually take leadership in New Zealand, and we want to give them the message that I'm giving today in terms of the sports. Right. How do we do it? How do we actually promote sports? Because I'm passionate, like Taya is, and everyone else here, about sports. What we do is every year we have a Easter tournament. Now the founders of those tournaments, it actually preceded the formation of the association. Back in 1912, when actually Taiwan was actually recognised by the New Zealand government, not mainland China. They had what they call the double 10th, which is the 10th of the 10th. And basically, even then, the consul then said, look, we need to keep these things going, and what's the best way to do it? What better way than sports? Because, as you heard before, sports breaks down barriers, sports gets people together. It's a social thing as well as a good thing for you health-wise. Basically what happened though is that when in 1972, when New Zealand recognised the mainland China, we came to the conclusion that we couldn't do it on double 10th anymore, so we changed to Easter. So as we are non-political, non-religious and that sort of thing, it worked out quite well. So now, so from now on, what we've been doing is running what we call the annual Easter tournament. It rotates through the 4 main centres. South Island, North Island, South Island, North Island. It's, and sorry, when I say main centres, if you think you're another main centre, you know which ones I'm talking about, I think. But what we do is we do multi-sports. Basketball, athletics, badminton, indoor soccer, you can see them all there. Everything, although on the rugby side, I'm afraid it's only touch at the moment, okay? Although, we're going to do something about that. Yeah, so I've already been told off about that actually when I presented. But basically, you know, it's multi-sports, and also backing up that, actually, there's a lot of social events on, dances, that sort of thing, ballroom dancing as well, which I suppose you could call a sport as well. And then we also have the cultural side. It's a cultural concert where, again, young Chinese can see, in terms of the fan dances, the Tai Chi, the Kung Fu, all those sort of things, lion and dragon dances, they can all learn about that. I've covered most of this in what I said, but basically we get about 2,000 people plus at the events, and really everyone looks forward to it every year. I mean, at the end of it, which is we have a closing ball, everyone says, when's the next one? This next slide is probably the main part of my talk. Basically, why I've explained to you what New Zealand Chinese Association is and how we're getting sports together is that New Zealand Chinese Association sees, and we as people see, Chinese and New Zealand as a symbiotic relationship. It's a win-win situation, and that's what ethnic diversity is. We should all be looking for a win-win situation. Basically, it's an integration into the New Zealand society as opposed to keeping our identity. Although our identity is important and our culture is important, we must be Kiwis. We've got to be good Kiwis, and probably the most important thing too is that we actually have to work within the structure that's already here. It's a Kiwi structure. We're New Zealanders in New Zealand, we must work through the structures. Either through basketball, rugby, whatever. The kids, I mean, my kids played football, sorry, the other football as well, and that sort of thing. But basically, they come through the system like anyone else does. We're Kiwis. I mean, one day I'd like to see a Chinese All Black out there. We actually have a female Chinese Sevens All Black in Tyler, but yeah, basically it's a case of the message is, look, work within the infrastructure, but our annual conference, our annual tournament gets the Chinese together to maintain that closeness and ethnicity. So you can have the best of both worlds, really, because I think that's one of the things that we as well, from immigrants, I suppose you would say, have in our different the diversity with which our ethnicities, is that we can actually have the best of both worlds, but it's important that we do it under the New Zealand umbrella. Again, I won't go through all this, but basically this is the objective that we have in terms of the Easter tournament. One of the very important things, which I know Paora likes, is the fact that we try to promote the elite athletes. We effectively, I suppose it's three ways really. The elite athletes, we try to give them the opportunity, one, meet each other, being Chinese athletes, but also through their connections with the New Zealand structures and infrastructures, to actually be able to work together there and actually make connections there and hopefully further their own careers. Lots of other things too, and like I said, I won't go through all those, but I guess one of the main things it has done is it's actually broken down a lot of barriers. We mentioned before about sports breaking down barriers. I mean, no matter who we are here, we know who the All Blacks are, the Silver Ferns are, and when they play, we all support them. Well, I do anyway. But basically, it's a case of, and our kids do, and our grandparents do, and our parents do, and that's our New Zealanders, our Kiwiness. Just for your information, we actually have had quite a few New Zealand representatives. This is not all of them, but way back, Glenn Kwok represented New Zealand in billiards. Arthur Leong in football. We had basketball. We've got some current ones: Glenn Joe, Jordan Isaac Latoa. We also have two Olympians that I can recall. It's Robin Wong, who's the mountain biker, and obviously Tyler Nathan Wong, this current Olympics in Rio. So basically, oh gee, I was just going to do that last. Basically, the message I want to give today is that, look, we as an association have recognised that sport breaks down barriers. We want to use sports to do exactly that and to get other interaction with other ethnic communities, but within the New Zealand community. And New Zealand's got an infrastructure, and that's why I really like to hear, we like hearing what we're hearing today about the fact that Susan and her team are actually looking at basically building into the New Zealand system an opportunity for all of us to carry out our objectives with the sport. So that last one actually was, yes, we did actually run a rugby game. So you can't tell me off anymore. And that was in Wellington in 2010. And just for your information, Wellington beat Auckland by a fair margin. Thank you.
It's a very good thing.
Tēnā koto, tēnā koto, tēnā koto katoa. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and in my mother tongue, I would say Dia Gwif agus Céad Míle Fáilte. On behalf of New Zealand Rugby, thank you very much for the kind invitation to be here with you today. The video you've just seen is one outcome from an initiative where a number of New Zealand's largest sports came together with a common focus of encouraging greater focus on inclusion and diversity of sport in New Zealand. The Sport for Everyone campaign has been driven by New Zealand Rugby with the great support of New Zealand Rugby League, New Zealand Football, Netball New Zealand, New Zealand Cricket, Hockey New Zealand, and with the support of the New Zealand Olympic Council and Sport New Zealand. The initiative and focus has been driven because of what we see as issues and opportunities in sport. The initial issue was a groundbreaking study that came out in 2015 that said homophobia in New Zealand sport was a major issue that needed to be tackled. Some members of our society were feeling that they couldn't be who they were. They didn't want to participate in sport, didn't feel they could participate in sport, and felt that the environment was less than ideal. We've seen issues since then of racism emerge in sporting context, and at another level we've seen governance on boards of sporting organisations recognised as also being an issue and not necessarily representative of the communities that we serve. But while we have issues, we know as leaders of sport in New Zealand, there's great opportunity that comes with living in the 5th most diverse nation in the OECD. There is real opportunity to use sport as a catalyst for social change. Together we can say there is no role for racism or homophobia in sport and in society. We can provide welcoming environments for all New Zealanders, irrespective of race, gender, ability, or sexual orientation. And we can introduce new migrants to our sports and encourage their participation and enjoyment of our games. And if we are to remain relevant to all New Zealanders, this is something we simply must do. Only 2 months ago, the CEOs of the organisations I have mentioned came together to commit to establishing a framework for diversity and inclusion, which included a programme of agreed activities to focus on by the 31st of December this year. In working alongside other sports, we've seen that rugby is not unique in the challenges it faces to be considered truly inclusive in terms of gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation and ability. This is not about creating a single policy aimed at one particular area of inclusion, but teaming up with other sports to get the message across that everyone should be encouraged and be able to participate and enjoy sport without prejudice and in welcoming environments. For rugby, we're developing policies, programs, education resources and rugby initiatives that encourage greater diversity and inclusion in our game. We're talking with our boards about why diversity and inclusion must be part of the business and the benefits in doing so. And through Sport for Everyone, we will continue to work with other sports because we are stronger, and together we will be stronger. There's much work to be done, but small steps often lead to big strides, and we're confident that sport will play an enormously positive role for all New Zealanders for generations to come. Thank you.
Those last slides, technology department. Okay, guys, just to sort of wrap up the presentation-y bit from us guys on the stage. This is the Papawai Kotahitanga Māori team in 1895. This, the guy three from the right in the middle is my great-grand-uncle. I lived next door to my family marae, which happened to be the base of the Māori Parliament. There was a Māori Parliament movement in the late 1890s. And iwi from all across New Zealand came to be part of the Māori Parliament movement in, it's just out of Greytown in the Wairarapa. But these boys here, during the time of the Māori Parliament, decided to get together and start a rugby team, which is what boys do when they're bored of Māori Parliament huis in Greytown. It's probably what boys and girls do all over the place. I think the thing that's interesting about this photo and this period of time, apart from the fact that I've got an ancestor in it, is that, and if those of you that know Wairarapa, you're like all rugby photos, you'll probably recognise a few names. In the period leading up to this, I'm absolutely certain that some Pākehā bloke, probably, walked up to these Māori blokes with a ball in his hand and said, "We've got this great game, I've got this great game, do you want to come and play the game?" Or one of these fellas walked up to the Pākehā bloke with a ball in his hand and said, "That looks like a great game, can we play the game too?" And I think I'm passionate about rugby and all the sports, but a bit like what Teo alluded to, the success, if you look at the success of New Zealand rugby, I'm fairly certain, as you pointed out, Teo, it's based on the fact that the sport is reasonably inclusive in New Zealand. And I think there are some other things that are interesting about rugby too. These early guys here, some of these guys went and played for the New Zealand Natives team around the same time. They had to adapt a style of rugby to beat much bigger countries. And if you look at the beginnings of New Zealand rugby, it's full of interesting tactics and interesting strategies. There's a marriage of, I think, early Pākehā settler ways of thinking about strategy and tactics and some Māori people's thinking about strategy and tactics that still to this day underpins the success of New Zealand rugby. It's all about innovation and looking for sources of innovation in every single aspect of the game, right down to the fine Adidas jerseys and things. And once again, to repeat, that's, I hate to be controversial, Teo, but you're probably right, that all of the codes need to look to how we can marry different ways of thinking, different strategies together to achieve a sporting outcome. Can I just go to the next slide, people? This bloke in the middle with the famous Ranfurly shield is my mother's brother. And Wairarapa has only won the Ranfurly Shield twice. This was the last time in the 1950s. These boys, at the time this photo was taken, had been in celebration mode for about 3 or 4 days. My understanding is that they won it somewhere in the South Island, and it took them 3 or 4 days to get back to Wairarapa. And they're all tradesmen. My uncle was a chippy, a carpenter. Around the time that this photo was taken, the boys took the Ranfurly Shield, as you see it happening, and geez, Ian, we better not make the association between our sport and alcohol. But the boys were celebrating, and they got outside the Workingmen's Club. There's an interesting name. In Greytown, we have a Workingmen's Club. The whole team stopped at the door because there had been an unvoiced policy that brown fellas didn't go inside the Workingmen's Club. And so they stopped at the door and everybody realised, oh, there's a rule that the brown fellas don't go inside here. The president of the Workingmen's Club walked outside and said, for God's sake, these boys just won the Ranfurly Shield. And by the way, I've got a Māori whakapapa, because the president at the time was a fair-looking fella from the Workman family, if you know that family. I just thought I'd share an interesting little moment in diversity and race relations in Wairarapa, but also a moment where sport transcends. And from that time on, there have been lots of brown fellas in the Workingmen's Club in South Wairarapa. Last photo, please, technical people. This is my under-13s team. I'm behind the camera on the day that the photo was taken. I live in a fairly sort of conservative rural part of New Zealand, but even in conservative rural New Zealand, this is my team that I actually coach. More than half of these boys have some kind of Māori whakapapa. 3 of these boys have Samoan whakapapa. 1 of these boys has Chinese whakapapa. There's only, and one of the coaches is Māori, and my 2 Pākehā mates on either side are, one of them's a 6th generation farmer, and the other one's one of you recent immigrants from Wellington to Wairarapa. So anyway, just thought I'd share that with you because, and to reiterate the message, for New Zealand sport to be successful, as Ian's pointed out, and as Tayo and Mark have pointed out, it needs to be something that we're all part of. Ladies and gentlemen, can you put your hands together for these gentlemen?